Hi folks, and welcome to my channel. And this time I'm not going to be talking about the Lotus Elise or the Land Rover Defender or restoring old Rusty. This time I'm going to be talking about restoring a room. And I have upstairs a room that is in desperate need for restoration. My daughter wants to have it as a bedroom, so I need to go and fix it. You will see me removing a wall which is separating the room in the middle. You will see me removing built-in cabinets, and I'm putting new plasterboards up to cover the holes up. We'll paint the walls, we sand the walls, we'll spray the ceiling in white, we'll spray the beams in white, we'll fix the lights, and I change floor panels because there's a few floor panels missing. This is all the kind of stuff we're going to be doing, and then finally you will see me putting in all the furniture into the room. So if you're interested in home do-it-yourself stuff, then maybe this video might be interesting for you. If you're not interested in it, okay, that's fine, then just skip it. But I have several tips in my videos that might be of interest to you, and maybe I can learn from you as well, because I don't know everything. I know a little bit, I have a little bit of experience, but I'm sure that there are people out there that have far more experience than I do, so I would really appreciate your comments and your tips to put them up on the video. So I'm all looking forward to your comments, and now I need to get on and start building or renovating that room. Okay folks, we're going to put up some drywall now, and where we have the cabinets, and before I do so I'd like to talk a bit about drywall. Now drywall is a plasterboard, and here you have one. They come in different thicknesses. This is 9mm, but you can get them in different sizes, dimensions, thicknesses, but also quality. When I say quality, some of them is water resistant and some is not. This is non-water resistant, so if you're going to work in a bathroom, then obviously you want to go for the green boards, which are water resistant. Another important aspect are the edges, and I don't know if you can see it, but this is very flat, and then you see this kind of, it goes down on the edge on both sides, and that's to allow you to put joint filler up when you put the boards next to each other, so you can actually cover that joint very well up, and you'll see that in the video. Now, which board you're going to need, that all depends on the application you're going to use and which room it's going to be used and so on. Now, taking pieces off a drywall is pretty easy. All you're going to need is a good quality knife, and you just get a ruler and then you just drag along like this. And I'm just going to cut off two pieces because I want to show you something. That's it. And then all what you need to do is crack it, you know, look. That's it, that's how easy it goes. And then go in the back and cut through. One piece. That's how easy that works. So that is not very hard. There we go. Now, if you're going to mount drywall on the wall, you can either glue it to the actual stone, like so, but you have to have a very good solid wall and drywall and dust-free. And that works great with a foam spray. This is one of them. So you would spray the back of the panel, let it dry a little bit, follow the instructions on the can, and then just stick it to the wall and it will hold. If you don't like glue, you can also use a normal cement that they use, glue cement as they call it. All kind of possibilities. Or you can even have a wooden board in the back, OSB or multiplex or anything of that, and then you can actually screw down the panel with special screws, and these are what we call drywall screws. They are special screws. They are coated so they don't get rusty. And for that one, of course, you're going to need a small handheld drill, and just drill them into the wood. But if you don't like to drill or you don't like to glue things, but you have a wooden background, you might as well use a hammer and small gyprox nails and nail the panel into place. Now, I personally wouldn't be doing that. I like the screws, it works quite handy. Now, you may not always have a proper wall. You may not always have a wooden background. So in fact you might want to put up a wall yourself, a separation wall, not a support wall, but just a separation wall with drywall. And then you can either build a wooden skeleton or you can use something like this. This is what we call a gutter, and it's in a galvanized steel, and you would put it down on the floor and on the ceiling, and these are the studs, and then you would put the studs in there like so, and then you can fix your gyprox or your drywall onto that. Now, holding the studs in place on the right distance, that's something you can do with these special pliers, and you can see the pin coming out. See that? Well, if I put it on here, then I can actually put that piece in place, and hopefully you can see it. Let me try to put it up like this and then see if I can hold it for you properly. Yeah, so let me show you that. Hopefully you can see it, and I'm just going to squeeze it one time. And you can actually see already that this punched a hole and it bended over metal in the back, so it holds in place. And you can do it on both sides, and you can, in fact, you should do 3 of these per stud. I'm just going to do one just to show you, but you can see already it's kind of getting solid. So that's very fast to work with, not expensive and very good. But try to get this type of pliers, because that's really handy. Otherwise the studs will move around a bit. And you can't put really a screw in because that would be in the way for the drywall. So let me put that aside. Now we talked a lot about putting now the wall up and what the substrate is about, but now we need to talk a little bit about corners, because you're going to have corners in a room. Now corners are coming in 2 sorts. I'm not talking about a curve, but I'm talking about a 90-degree or 60-degree corner. We're talking about an inner corner, and an inner corner is something like this. So this is the surface where the paint would be, this is the paint, and this is the corner of the room. Right? So the bottom part is the corner. And if you have a corner like this, an inner corner, you don't need to enforce it because there are 2 separate walls and they're always going to live a bit. And the best approach is to use some elastic kit and just put this in the corner like so. Nothing more. That works just perfect. That's what I always use, because everything else I've used so far cracked. Now you may as well have an outer corner. This would be an outer corner, like so. Let me show you that. So here I have, assuming, a piece of wood. Need to make some space here. And I could have a piece of drywall on there, and let me just put that up. Now you see, when I'm drilling in the screws, I'm watching it so they are just deep enough, but you have special heads on screwdrivers that will decouple as soon as the screw is deep enough into the gyprox. Now I don't have this one right here. I'm going to cut this side off because it's a bit in my way, so let me do that. There we go. See, that's how easy it is to work with drywall. You can just cut it. And now I will put this plate up to create this outer corner, right? Okay. So now what we have is a outer corner. So this would be a wall this way, and this is a wall. So here you have the outer corner. Now, of course, if you don't protect this, the corner, people will bump into it and chips will come off. That's why you have metal parts like this. Protection, that's what you put on the corner, like so. And then you put your joint filler along the edge. And then you're going to have a very strong corner. For an inner corner, you don't need this. And let me show you what I mean with an inner corner. assuming now, and I need to take another piece. Okay, let me grab this piece. There we go. Oh, that's a bit too big. So let me cut a piece off. These are all leftovers anyway, so I don't worry too much about it. There we go. So let me just stick that in the corner there. Now, I didn't cut it nicely, guys, so sorry for that. I'm just going to hold it in place with 2 screws. Okay, so now this would be an inner corner, right? So a wall and a wall. Now here, I don't want to put this kit in. You can, but it's really not necessary, and I always use elastic kit to put that together. Now obviously, if you're doing it on the edge of the drywall where it goes down a bit, it's slanted a bit, you would have to level it out first. But then the corner, I typically fill up with some elastic kit, and they come in all kind of types and sorts. And they just go along. Now I'm exaggerating a bit, and I squeezed a bit too hard in the beginning. And then all I do is use a wet finger. Now I got it on my lips now. Yeah, I mean, and I just go like this. And you can see, yeah, I shouldn't have done this bottom part. There we go. So now this is nicely sealed up, and it is elastic, so both sides can move a little bit, so and you won't get cracks, and you can paint over it. So this is how it goes. So, you like my fingers, right? Let me wipe it off on this board anyway. I don't need this anymore. So I hope I was able to explain you a few things on how actually you can do a lot with drywall and how I will proceed, because you won't see it in the video, all this stuff while I'm doing it. So now let's get back to the room. I will have to fix the plasterboard that I put up yesterday, and for that I'm going to use some special tape. Here is that tape, and you just put it on the joints, and then after that you fill up the joints with joint filler. Now I always recommend to use professional products. You can get all kind of products on the market, but it learned me over time that if you go for the cheap stuff, you always have problems, and the result is never what you want to be. But besides that, you're going to need a couple of other things. You're going to need some kit to fill up the little joints once you start painting, especially the joints between wood and plasterboard. You can't do this with joint filler or joint finisher because it will crack afterwards. So I'm going for this higher quality professional stuff. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to sand it all down. And then finally, I will put some paint up, and here is the paint. Anything else? So go for professional paint again if you can. And that's not the paint you get in the Gamma or the Brica or whatever. Not that it's not good paint, but you will feel the difference if you really go for quality paint like this one. I'm not going to make any commercial about what you should buy, but that's what you have to do. Now the room I'm in, I'm going to paint it all white because this is fashion today, so it's going to be a white room, and then I will do some walls as an accent wall with actually black paint, matte paint. I don't paint with gloss or satin, it's going to be all matte, but you'll see that. So let me get on, and then you'll see how I advance through the works in the next couple of days. So the first thing we're going to do is to remove all the dust from the areas where the joints are. And then you will see that wherever you place the gyprock screws or the drywall screws, you have these little flanges of cardboard. And that's normal because the screw is a bit recessed into the cardboard. Now I'm using a hammer to knock that in. So that's a little bit of a tip, guys. So you see this hammer, that the head is not really flat, it's kind of rounded. So if you hit on these little screws here, then you see that all these flanges will disappear. And that way it's nice and flat and these little flanges of cardboard don't get in your way. And the last thing to do is to roll out the tape. And you start from the top and you're just rolling down and press it down. So this tape is enforced tape. You can also get this tape in cardboard, but that's not that good. This is much stronger. And now what's left is we need to put the joint filler up, and then that part is done. The next step is to put the joint filler onto the joints. Meanwhile, we already placed the tape on the joints, and now it's time to prepare the joint filler. Now, joint filler comes in different forms. You can buy the pre-prepared one, which is kind of a paste. You don't need to do anything with it, you just open the box and use it. It works. The problem with that is that it really takes a long time to dry out. And that's why I'm always going for a powder form. And you can see on this package here that says 45. Well, that's the open time you have. So between the time you made it and by the time you can no longer use it. So that's the time within you have to consume the amount of joint filler that you prepared. So keep that in mind. They come in different times. You have 35 and 45. You may have others as well, but those are the ones I'm using. 45 seems to be a good time. So if you're going to prepare this, there's always an instruction on the back of the pack, but I am not doing it that way. I do it my way, and you don't need to do it my way, but you're gonna need some fresh water and a good tub. And I'm using, as you can see, a very flexible tub. And that is good because once this joint filler has dried up after 45 minutes, and you want to make the next bunch, you really need to clean out this tub. And if it's dried up, you know, by just deforming the tub like this, it cracks off and it comes off so easily, and you can prepare the next bunch of joint filler. You shouldn't leave any residues in there because then, you know, the drying time will accelerate. Anyhow, so what I do typically is I pour a bit of water in it, not too much, something like that, you know, something that gets me going. And then I will pour the joint filler in it. Again, not too much. And I will be using a drill with a mixer on, and I'm just gonna mix it. And I don't mind if it's very thin in the beginning. I will fill it up and I'll make it almost as thick as butter, a little bit less than butter. I found out that to be the best way of doing it. And at the end, of course, then you're gonna need some knives. And these are the knives to put the joint filler onto the wall. And you have different lengths. So let's prepare this joint filler and let's get going. So I'm not going to put too much in right now. I mean, and certainly not the whole package because I can't consume that in one go. I'd rather do it in smaller pieces. So let me mix this first. It's going to make a bit of noise, guys. So. Now let me show you from the inside, and then you can have an idea on how it should be. I got lucky this time. I got it straight, the right thickness from the start, but I'm kind of used to that, so I know more or less the doses I need to use. So let me give you a close-up. So you see how smooth that is. There's no pieces left in it, and it's fairly thick, you know, it stays in shape. That's the kind of density you need to get. So now let's put it on the wall. So I'm going to use this knife and place it on like this. Now you don't have to worry too much about it being not that even. Just put a big pile on it, like so, and then just put it on. And that's it, guys. You don't need to do more than this. That's very simple. I'll do a bit on the top part. Now the top part is a bit more difficult because I need to join the old wall. But as you can tell, it doesn't really matter much the first time, because if it's really uneven, you will have to do a couple of runs on it. And this is how it goes. It's time to start the ceiling, and the ceiling is kind of dirty. It has dust on it, and it has kind of grease on it from all those years. So we need to clean it. Now, you can buy all kind of products to clean painted surfaces. I'm just going to use something very simple that we all use in the kitchen: detergent. But before I'm going to wash off the ceiling, I'm going to use some of my grandmother's underwear, or whatever it is, some cloths. You can buy piles of these old cloths. They washed them before, of course. They ripped them apart and then they pack them. They press them in a big pack. Very handy stuff if you do a lot of do-it-yourself stuff. So anyway, I was just kidding about my grandmother. So with one of them, I will take off the dust first, and then I will wipe off the dirt and the debris with my sponge, and then finally I'm going to wipe it over again with a dry cloth. So this is how we're going to do it. It's a high ceiling, so I'm going to need a scaffold, otherwise I can't reach, and even with the scaffold I might not be able to reach all the way on the top, so I may have to go and get a ladder. So let's start going on it. We cleaned up the ceiling, and now it's time to paint. Now painting can be done in many different ways. We can go the traditional way with the roller and the bath, or you can go with another system. Now it all depends a bit on what the surface is. Obviously with a roller, it's great for even surfaces and you can just roll it along, but if that surface is a bit pitted or it has uneven areas, then the paint isn't getting in. So you will have to use a brush to fill all that in, and especially on edges. So if you have a lot of rims, you have to use a brush to go around the rim. So painting the traditional way with a bath and a roller and a brush is great. But it all depends again on what you're painting. Now in my case, the ceiling that I have here is made out of wooden planks, and they join together and there's a little groove in between the planks. The problem is that with the roller, I ain't getting the paint in there properly. Not only that, I also have a lot of edges, and I have some old beams, and those beams will have to be painted as well. And old beams have all kind of curves and holes and uneven parts that I couldn't get in with the roller, so I would have to use my brush. So that's a lot of work. That's why I'm going to spray the ceiling. And if you have a lot of surfaces to paint, spraying may be the answer to your problem. Now, there's many ways to skin a cat, and it's the same thing with spraying. You could spray a wall with an airless system, and the airless system, that's what I have downstairs, and just have a look on what that is now. This is a true airless system whereby there's a high pressure pump which is sucking out the paint out of a bucket which is normally placed here, and it pushes it through the pump under high pressure, and it's about 120 to 150 bar through the hose, and then finally the paint is being pushed out through the nozzle and it hits the surface that you want to paint. So in other words, the paint is not carried by air whatsoever, so the overshoot and the overspray is very minimal. But this is a really great system, but it's big and it uses a lot of paint. Before the hose is fully filled up, the pump is filled up, and this metal pipe here is filled up, and you can see how big the pipe is. That is consuming a lot of paint. So if you have to paint the whole house, I would say this is a great system, but if you don't have that much to paint, then I wouldn't be using that. Obviously, you have all kind of controls on this one. You can actually control the pressure. You can set it to PSI or bar. So for us Europeans, it's bar, but Americans, it's PSI. So all these things are possible to be set. It's a great system. But then again, it's a lot of cleaner work afterwards, so not that suitable for the work I'm going to do today. Okay, we are back. You've seen that airless system. It's big and bulky, and it's going to burn a lot of paint before you can even start getting to paint. So I'm not going to use this upstairs. This is great for real big buildings, and if you have to do a whole house, then I would go for that. But in this case, the room isn't all that big. So I'm going for a HVLP system. And this is an HVLP system, as you can tell. It's high volume, low pressure. And it basically means that this compressor will produce a lot of airflow, but very low pressure. And through the gun, or the spray gun, the air will come in and it will suck out the paint out of the bucket. And then you have low velocity on the paint. You know, the paint will come out of the nozzle and it will hit the walls with a very low velocity, and because the velocity is so low, paint doesn't bounce back as much as the way it normally would do with a normal air gun. And you have less overshoot, and you have less spray on the ground and stuff like that. Nevertheless, although this is a great system to use, you will have to mask up the floor, and you have to use plastic sheets or something like that to cover all the surfaces where you don't want any little spray on, because this is still going to produce a little bit of spray. Not much, it's minimal, but still it does produce that. If you go in for a normal spray gun with a compressor, yes, then you're going to have a lot of spray, so I wouldn't be using that. That's out of the question for indoors use, I would say. Now obviously, if you're going to start spraying with a spraying system, you got to watch out what kind of paint you have. Now I'm having water-based paint, but if you have paint which is based on solvents, then you got to watch out, because you will have to wear a mask. And I'm going to wear a mask as well, because I don't want to get that paint in my lungs, but the paint is non-toxic and there are no harmful fumes on that. But the solvent-based paint will have harmful fumes, and then you would have to have the proper filters on your mask. And then the last thing you will have to wear, and you'll see that in a few minutes, is a coverall, you know, a white coverall, so you're fully covered while you're painting. You'll see that. So, let me get on now, and I will cover up the floor with some plastic sheets first, and then we'll start painting, and you'll see how that goes. So that will be my third day. I've got the floor covered. I'm now ready to prepare the paint. Paint is typically quite thick, and this paint is extremely thick. Look. Now this is a bit too thick actually for the spray gun, so you have to get the right viscosity for the paint, otherwise the paint isn't going to work too well in the gun. So I have to dilute it, but typically you will find on the package how much you can dilute it. On this paint it's about 10%, but I'm just going to pour some in, and then we'll see where it gets us. I don't want to pour too much in, because otherwise it may be too thin. And I'm going to mix it now. Let's see. It's a bit better. I think I can pour a bit more in, not that much. Let's see. Oh, this is a lot better. So let's do a test spray, okay? So we've done a test spray, that looks good. So now we are ready to paint the ceiling. I've got my protective suit on and the protective mask. So I'm ready to go. So let's start going. All right, so we finished the ceiling. It's painted all around. It was quite a job to do, and I'm quite happy that I sprayed it because without the spray it wouldn't have worked that well. And now what's left is the walls. So stay tuned, and then you see when I'm finishing up the rest. Meanwhile, the joint filler has dried up and is now ready to be sanded. So you will be needing an electrical sander. Now you can do it by hand, but it's a very tedious job. So go for an electrical sander, but make sure that you have a vacuum hose attached to it. Now, don't use your wife's vacuum cleaner because that's gonna cause a lot of problems with your wife or your girlfriend because you're gonna clog it up and you will destroy it. Go and get a do-it-yourself vacuum cleaner that is fit for chalk dust and wood dust and all this kind of stuff. And try to go for an automatic one because as soon as you start your sander, it will kick in the vacuum cleaner. Just look at that. And that's a very good system to work with because you don't have to worry about turning the vacuum cleaner on and off all the time. It really works well. Now for sanding, I don't use really a big sander. It's not necessary. And I'm going to use a grit of 150. Now that's, for me, the best grit there is. It's not too abrasive and not too fine, and it's great. I'm always using these self-sticking kind of pads. Sanding paper pads. It's kind of a Velcro approach and you can just stick it to the foot. Now, if you look closely, you will see all these little holes here. That's where the dust will be sucked into the vacuum cleaner. Now, this is very powerful and I'll show you that in a minute. In fact, it's so powerful that the sander gets stuck on the wall. I can actually let it go. So let me try to show you that. That's quite impressive, isn't it? It even stays. Let's see. Now, so that's how good your vacuum cleaner should be, and your sander, because that way you're guaranteed that you have no issues. Now, I caused a bit of a dent now because I left it on too long. But anyway, I'll just plaster it up again. So let me now start sanding all this stuff, and then we may have to put some extra joint filler up, or maybe we can start immediately with joint finisher. So the question is always, is it good enough or not good enough? And the best tool you have are your hands. Just move over it. You can even close your eyes and you can feel where the difference is. If you still feel a difference, then you might have to put a second coat of joint filler up. Or you could use some joint finisher, but that is not to be thicker than 1 millimeter. So I'm going to go for another coat of joint filler. It's going to be a lot less than the initial one. It's going to be a lot easier. So let me put that one up then, And after that, we'll let it dry again. It's going to dry a lot faster. And then finally, we'll sand it again. And then we put joint finisher up. And then the surface is ready to be painted. So let me put some more joint filler up. So if you're going to put a second coat or a first coat or a third coat of joint filler up, you always have to work with a very clean tub. Because if the tub is not clean, you will have small pieces of debris in it, and you won't be able to smoothen out the joint filler on the wall. You will have tracks on it and grooves in it, and then you can start all over again, because we want to put the final layer or the final coat up right now. The other thing you have to be careful of is that you always use very clean knives. As you can see, you may have to sand them down a bit, but if you wash them after every use, then it should be okay. So the knife, the blade itself, should be very clean. So let's prepare it, and then we'll start putting it up. See, I even see a little bit of debris in here. It's very small. Sometimes it's hard to see even, but here it is. You know, these small little things, they will really bug you. There we go. All right, so we're going to make a little bit of joint filler, not too much because it's our second coat, and then we put it on the wall. I never start with too much. I can always add joint filler. Alright folks, the second coat of the joint filler is now on the wall, and it needs to dry. It's not going to take that long. I hope by tomorrow it will be dry, and I can then finally sand it again and then put the joint finisher up, which is a more fine kind of paste that will remove all the uneven parts. I even may put it on the rest of the wall. The other wall is already patched up with some joint filler here and there where we had some damage. So all what's left now is some joint finisher and some sanding, and then we can finally paint. And as I said before, this side of the wall will be pitch black and all the rest will be bright white. So, we are nearing the end on this wall. We got 2 coats of joint filler, we sanded it, but if you look closely enough, you see small pores in the joint filler. And that's what we're going to solve now with what we call the joint finisher. Now, it comes in a bag, dry, and you have to mix it with water, or you can have a premix. And I'm using a premix in this case, and it's a different brand than what you saw before. And the reason I'm using a premix here is because I just happen to have it. But the coat is so thin that it dries very fast, so I'm not really worried about it like the issue with the joint filler, because if you buy pre-prepared joint filler, then you have to wait a long time before it's dry. There are products on the market that are a joint filler and finisher at the same time, but I am not too hot on that. Anyhow, I'm going to put this up, just let you have a look how thick that is. You know, this is really thick stuff. So you have to use a lot of force to put it on the wall. But that's okay, it's good for the muscles. But I'm going to use a real big knife because I want to cover big surfaces and not just small little areas. So that's why I'm going to need a big knife. The bigger, the better, as they say. All right, so let me start doing that, and then we'll come back. It's about time to start painting again, and we'll paint the wall on the right hand side. That's the wall we're going to paint with white paint. But before we can start painting, I have first of all to mask off the areas that should not be painted. So it's the plinths and it's around the door. I need to tape it off. This time I'm going to paint it with a roller, not with an airbrush, but just with a roller. That works very well. Just make sure you get the right roller. Now, one thing, before you start using a roller, you have to make it wet, and you can see my hands are really wet when I stroke on it. Sometimes you may have to squeeze out a bit because you don't want to have drips. Now, what you should not do is put the roller completely underneath the water, because then water will get in the holes and then it will bug you the whole time, believe me. But you got to make it wet and then make sure it's kind of dried up a little bit, and that way the paint really doesn't get deep into the fur or whatever, the wool or whatever that is of this material. So we're going to use a cloth and I'm going to use a roller, and the idea is that we're going to use long strokes on the wall. That gives you the best effect, and that's why I have kind of a very long extendable roller arm, or whatever you want to call it, so I can really get all the way into the top of the wall, and that's a great way of doing it. And I'm going to start with a brush, and I'm going to go around the edges where the roller can't come. So that's the first thing, and then after that we start really rolling. We've applied the joint finisher. It's now dry, and it's time to start sanding it. And we're going to sand it with a grit of 220, and after that I can finally start painting. Now I know all this is boring. It's like joint filler and then joint filler and then sanding again, and then joint finisher and sanding again. But that's the thing about preparing a surface for painting. The preparation work is all the work. The painting itself is quick. So let me get on sanding it, and then we start to paint. So how do you know when the wall is ready to be painted? Well, that's very simple. You have to do a visual inspection, and you shouldn't see any uneven areas. Just go around it and check it out, and if you do, correct them. Either you fill it up and you sand it again. But the best tools you have are your hands. So just slide with your hands over the areas that you filled up and keep your eyes closed. Don't look. and you should not be able to tell where the joint is, but you should not feel any difference in depth or height. If that feels good, then you know your wall is ready to be painting. If you paint a wall with white paint and you use matte, really matte paint, that will cover up a lot of the imperfections. If you're using white paint, which is glossy, that will highlight the uneven areas and it's not going to look as good. So the wall has to be finished much better if you're going to use glossy paint than matte paint. Matte paint is far more forgiving as it kind of covers up. Now black paint, it's a bit more sensitive. You see more unevenness, and that's why I've gone for matte black paint. Use a clean cloth and just wipe the wall, so there is no more dust left, because you're always going to have some dust left no matter how good your vacuum cleaner was when you were sanding. And you can see a little bit how white this got, but this is quite all right already because I kind of cleaned it up. So do that and then you can start painting. I've got the paint here. It's black paint, as you can tell. It's pitch black and it's extra matte. So that will look pretty cool, I think, and we'll see the result in a few minutes. And I'm going to paint it with the standard roller. We've used it before on the white wall, and now I'm going to use it on the black wall. Now the roller I'm using right now is a different type. It has very short hairs on it. The one that I use on the white wall had longer hairs. Now you can buy rollers for all kind of paints. The ones with longer hairs, they will create kind of a structure on the wall. But with black paint, you don't really want to have that. You want to have this as smooth as possible. That's why you always should go for a roller with very short hairs. Typically you find them in different types. I think there's about 5 or 6 different types, not talking about the ones with a motif on it or a pattern. But I can't start rolling immediately. First of all, I have to go around the edges of the wall on the contours and then, draw a paint line where the black paint will meet the white wall. Now you can do this with taping, but I'm not going to use tape for that. I'm going to use it with my free hands and a good quality small brush. Now if you are not very good with painting straight lines and you don't have a very steady hand, then I probably would recommend that you tape the edges, but I'm not going to do this. So let's start on the edges and then you'll see what I mean. I have already done a little piece for you so you can see it, but it's actually a brush, a good quality brush with some paint on it, and we're going along the edges where the black wall is meeting the white wall. And you need to do this with a pretty steady hand, enough paint, and you may have to do it a couple of times, and then just move along until you have a visual good quality line. And this is how we're going to do this. Now it takes a bit of time, but at the end it will look quite alright. Okay guys, we've got the paint ready. We have the wall ready. It's cleaned up and we did the contours already with a brush. So now we're going to roll it. This is going to take about at least 2 coats, I suspect. So let's see how it goes. So the first coat of black paint is on the wall, and I think it looks quite good. It's still wet and shiny, but it's going to become very matte, and I'm just going to let it dry now for about 3 to 4 hours, and then replace the second coat and the last coat. Meanwhile, I will repaint for the second time the wall on the other side, and then I'm basically done with painting, and I can't say that I regret it. So keep watching, because next is fixing the floor. A lot of us have laminate floors, and it is not uncommon that they get damaged or you have to replace a piece. Or in my case, I am actually missing a piece. There used to be a wall here, and I removed this wall. This was just a division wall for my kids' room. But now I'm having this gap here in the floor. You know, I don't have any laminate over here, so let me remove this old piece of wall-to-wall carpet, and the first thing I'm going to do is check that the surface underneath is good, and it is good. And your surface could be concrete or it could be anything. Mine is OSB, it's a kind of compressed wood, and that's now the area where I have to fit in a new piece. Now, of course, if you need to fill in or repair pieces of your laminate floor, you will have to have exactly the same panels. And I'm kind of lucky because when I buy building materials, I always buy sufficient spares. So I keep this aside just in case I'm going to need it. And luckily for me, I did that because that's what I'm going to need. So I took one of the spares, and sometimes you can still get it in the store, but not always, not after 10 or 15 years. So I used one that I had as a spare, and the first thing I need to do is to make sure that I have a very straight edge on it. So you need to cut a straight edge at least on one side. You can't use the normal lips that are on there, because this is what we call a click step quite often, so it clicks into each other, these panels, but you can't use that if you need to fill in something, because you need to put it in under an angle, and that's not possible in this case. So make sure that your replacement part has at least one straight edge to begin with. If it doesn't, then you need to cut it straight. And you can do this on a circular saw, a table saw, whatever you have. Now, the second thing is that the edge of the gap or the part that you're going to replace has to be straight as well. So, with the piece that you already checked for being straight, just place it in like so. And check that you have no gaps. And this looks perfectly straight, this side of the wall, of the floor, I'm sorry. And also check the other side. And guess what? Here I'm having an issue. It isn't straight, and it has a gap of about 1/2 centimeter. So I will have to fix this. And that's why we now will, first of all, cut a piece off along a straight line on this side of the floor. Now, cutting a piece off in a straight line isn't all that difficult, but you have to have the right tools and method. And this is how I do it. I'm getting a few spacers that I place into the area where my guide will be, because you can't cut a straight line with the loose hand. You have to have something to slide along with your circular saw. And I'm using an aluminum bar, but you can use a piece of wood, it doesn't really matter, that I will place on a certain distance from the side, and that's going to be my guide when I'm going to use a handheld circular saw. Now you can use another one, it doesn't really matter, and I will just slide along it like so, and that will give me exactly that straight line. So let me show you a little bit more of a close-up now on how we're going to adjust the circular saw and how we go into place the ruler. So let me give you a little bit of a close-up of the uneven side, so then you have an idea what I was referring to. You see this gap here? That's the problem. So we need to cut it straight, and if you look real close, you see even that the gap is not even equal, it just gets wider. So we're going to measure the maximum distance of this groove or this gap, wherever it's the biggest part. And I suspect, just looking at an eye glance, that it's going to be right here. So we're going to cut this side straight, but we're not going to cut too much out of it. I think if I cut it at 14.5, and you could be working in inches, it's probably going to be quite good. So 14.5 is what I'm going to need. I'll do it, and I check the other sides as well, because you need to check it all over, just to make sure that everything is in place properly, that you don't end up with a surprise. Yeah. So I checked on every side of this gap that I have at least 14.5 centimeters, but in your case that could be inches, that doesn't really matter. And also make sure that whatever the plank that you have, the replacement part, is wide enough. This is 20 centimeters, so that's good enough. I will have to cut off a part of that as well. So now the next thing is actually to place the guide up. And placing the guide up is easy, but I will place underneath the guide some spaces. And these spaces are nothing else than little pieces of this material, the same thickness, so then at least I can bolt down the guide or screw down the guide to the floor. Now, the guide itself, you don't want to bolt it down onto your real floor, because then you're going to damage the floor. You want to lock it down into the area where you're going to place the replacement part. And this is why I'm doing this. Now, you don't need to use aluminum. You could use whatever you want. So let me just put that in, and then we see. Now it's going to be a matter of spacing it. How far away does it have to be? Well, that's going to depend a bit on your circular saw that you're going to use. So this is the circular saw, and if you look on the foot of the circular saw, there is always a wide part. Oops. See, there's the wide part and there's the smaller part. So I'm going to make sure that the wide side is going to ride on my existing floor, and that the smaller side is going to run against the guide. So what you got to do is just measure that distance between the blade and the edge of the foot. And in my case, that is 2 centimeters. So we're going to place now the ruler, and remember that the gap that we initially measured was 14.5 centimeters. We know that the offset of the circular saw was 2 centimeters. So let's just measure the gap now, and it's 14.5 minus 2 centimeters brings it to 12.5. And I'm just going to place this guide at 12.5 centimeters. There we go. And then I'm just going to screw it in place. And I'll double check. Yeah. You got to do this quite accurate, because otherwise the plank that you're going to cut may not fit. There we go. And I just want to double check that. Yeah, and it's 12.5. That's good. And now I do the other side, and then we are ready to cut. So we have the ruler in place, and the idea is that we're going to slide along the edge of it. And while we slide, you've got to make sure that the circular saw stays aligned with this metal bar. So it has to be very well in place. Don't believe you can hold it with your hands, because that's not going to work, guys. Alright, so the next thing to do is to verify the thickness of the or the cutting depth of the circular saw. Now, you don't want to cut into the concrete if there's concrete underneath. You don't want to cut into supporting wood, the board which is underneath. So you need to adjust the height of the blade to the thickness of the material. And there's a couple of things you can do that, ways you can do it. You can use the guide that you have on the machine, but that's not always that accurate. The easiest way I found is to take a piece of that material that is on the floor and just place it on there and see that it just cuts through. If you do this, always remove your battery. If it's a battery one, if it's on the mains power, remove it from the mains power line. And now we're kind of ready to cut. So let's see how that goes. And I'm going to start at the other side and then go through it. You can see that we now have a very clean and straight cut edge, yet the part isn't really removable yet because it's still stuck at the ends. It's the same thing for that one, that's still stuck at the end towards the wall over here. So there we need to do some extra cutting, but I need another kind of cutter to do this because the circular saw can't get all the way into the corner. Now a little bit about the circular saw. And believe me, I am not making a commercial for this brand, but these little handheld ones are very, very handy. They are light, and they come with a very thin blade as well. You know, you can see that over here, and let me just open that up a bit so you can see the complete blade. See how thin that blade is, and it works real well, and they are not that expensive, and you can really do precise work with that. And this is what you're going to need. You can see how thin that cut actually is. You know, it was something like this. It's less than 1 millimeter. So the next thing we need to do is to continue cutting all the way to the end. Now you can't do this with a circular saw, so I'm going to do it with a vibrating saw, and this is one of them. They come in different brands again, and they don't really rotate, but they vibrate very fast. And I'm going to use a steel-based cutting blade for that. And I'm going to slide it along the edge, like so, all the way up to the end. And to do that, I'm going to use a guide, the same guide that I used before, and I place it nicely along the edge. Put my knee on it, and I rest on it, and here we go. And here we go. And now that has been cut, and I can remove it. And you see how easy that goes? Just take your time. Let me do the other side, and then we can start preparing the panel that has to go into it. So we removed all the debris, and now we should have a nice and parallel opening in the floor, which is supposed to be 14.5 centimeters. That's correct. You double check in the middle, you double check at the end, and this is 14.5, and the far end side is also 14.5. So that's good. However, the plank I'm having is a little bit wider. Yeah, you can see that. So I'll have to cut it to 14.5. I'm going to do this on my circular saw, on my saw table in the shop. If you don't have such a thing, then use the manual little handheld circular saw, but always use a guide. Do it the same way as we've cut the edge straight. So let me go to the workshop and cut these planks. So here we are. I have to set the circular saw to the right width, but I'm going to make first a test piece. I know the distance 14.5, but first of all I'm going to create a test piece at 14.5, fit it in, and then do the adjustments before I cut my final planks, because I don't have that many spare planks anymore. So let me cut first a test piece. 14.4. So let me go and check it upstairs, and if it fits, we do the final cut. The test piece just fitted fine, so now let's cut the final pieces and then we'll go and fit them. So here's the plank that we made. We trial fitted it already. It fits nicely, as you can see. And before I'm going to put it in, I'm going to put some glue on the floor, on the substrate, because otherwise this plank will be sitting in it loose. Make sure that you have no debris left in it, because otherwise it's going to be a bit of an issue. So let's put it in. There we go. And I will need to knock it in a bit. So it's nice close, and now just step on it so the glue really gets spread open, and that feels pretty good. It might be that you really have an issue with a small groove like this, and that can happen, that you do get a groove. Then that's no big deal. You can either wax it so it's filled up with wax, but you can also use some glue, and this is some Fix All glue. And just, fill it up with the glue. Like so. Rub it in. And now you got a real nice white line, right? Not really something you really want to get. And fill it up. And then use some of your sawdust, the dust that you had when you were cutting the planks. Put it on there and just rub it in, Just rub it in. Take the excess away from the glue. And then start rubbing. Rub away the glue, and there you go. Now the groove is now nicely filled up. There you go. So now it's filled up, and it has a bit the color of the original boards that you placed. So here you go. You can't really tell where it's been. Of course, we know where it's been over here, but it looks very nice, and nobody can tell that actually we placed a new piece in. And that's what you can do. Now this took me about an hour, and that's including the taping on the video. So not really hard to do, just work very precise. So this is it. 37 working hours and 320 euros. And the room is all complete and ready for the daughter. I think it turned out quite well, and I really hope that you enjoyed the video. So keep watching, guys. Thank you for viewing. Bye bye.